Good morning, beautiful people. Welcome back to the second hour of LoveBabz Love Talk. Oh, I'm so delighted this morning because I get to talk to my great love, Issa. Hey, Issa. How are you? Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, good.
Oh my gosh.
Hello.
I've been waiting.
Okay, can I just ask you about that song that was just playing just now? That was gorgeous.
That's
Oh Mane Padme Hum.
Yes.
Who is that?
A young sister here moved from South Africa with her husband and children. And she is her name is
Tabisa. Okay,
Tabisa.
see that. I have to get that. That was gorgeous.
She's so talented. She's incredible. And she's a force of nature, you know.
I can hear it. Sweet Sorrow. Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, you are
gorgeous.
welcome. You are welcome. I'm glad you like it. I love having her music on this show.
That was a beautiful way to enter the space. Thank you.
Oh my God, it's so nice to see you. Well, let me tell people, I've been telling people about you. I cannot believe Theo is 14. And I see those baby pictures because I knew you when we were bloggers, like a 1,000 years. Yes. Yeah. So to see him 14 is like, and now he's like so tall. I was like,
I know.
And you have a dog, Jake.
Yes. And I apologize in advance because we got our boosters this weekend, my son and I. And so we're both a little bit out of it. And so, see, that's what I was apologizing for. I knew that when I could hear my kid getting up, I apologize.
And the dog gets right up with him. That's all right. That's fine. This is what makes live radio. So
I knew that. Sorry.
So you got a lot going on. You have this new book out called Grief Notes or Notes on Grief. Grief Thoughts.
Yeah.
And it's sold out, my dear, on Amazon. I didn't get my copy yet.
Yeah. They just fixed that today. Thank God. Yeah, it was my fault. I launched on a Friday. You're supposed to do these things on a Tuesday, but I'm a maverick, and I was like, "Fuck a Tuesday, back to the Tuesday."
And so I was at the book party, like virtually, like everybody else, and I learned a few things that I did not know that I thought I knew. That I was surprised I didn't know how beautiful your voice is. Like you are a singer.
You know, in the book, I talk about that, interestingly enough. I talk about how when I was a little girl, if you asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, that's what I wanted to be. Like my mom tells stories of me being 2 years old with like a pencil and like singing into the pencil like a mic. And then my dad, because he had his own singing and music dreams sort of crushed, he just thought, in a very baby boomer way, it was best if I just stuck to what I was good at, which was being smart, being academic, getting good grades, getting a really great job, and not really doing that whole art thing. And he crushed my dreams. And it's, you know, one of the things I say in the beginning of the book is this book is about grieving difficult and complicated people. You know, my father was an amazing father, but he was complicated, right? And so we have parents sometimes that we love so much, but sometimes they cause damage inadvertently, even though they were trying to do their best. Sometimes they weren't trying to do their best, but sometimes they were, right? And what it's like to grieve that, what it's like to grieve somebody who was such a source of love and support and guidance, and you knew that no matter what, they had your back, but they also, you know, they messed you up, right? As parents are wont to do. Hey, Theo, do you think you can get Jacob into your bedroom, please? Please run amok.
So you wrote this book because your father had passed away, and it was quite painful, and it was a whole series of events around his passing, leading up to his passing. It was a whole series of events. We've all watched you go through this. Like we all sort of sat through this playing out. That's one of the beauties of social media, I think, is that you can be a part of people's lives in ways that you can't be when you're physically there, right?
Yeah.
So you have this experience on top of a bunch of other experience. Talk to me a little bit about when you knew that this needed to be a book.
So right away I wanted to start writing the book, right? Because it had been unfolding for most of that year. It all started sort of January 2015 is when he was told, "You have a lump, we need to check it out." And then the series of events that happened after that, leading to his death only 9 months later in September of 2015. It all sort of went really, really quickly. Um, and after he passed away, a couple of months after that, I wanted to start. And my love, Disha Philyaw, she is a consummate writer. She wrote The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, a huge
Mhm.
success last year. You were for that. And we've been friends since well past a good 10, 11 years, maybe 12. And we've always been friends, but we've always been writing buddies as well. And so after my dad died, I wanted to start putting it into a memoir form. And she was there with me. Like, I went all the way out to her house and like stayed in her attic and like, it was like the my precious in her, and we went over it. And then I just froze. I couldn't do it because the depth of emotion that I had to mine in order to really do it justice was just more than I could bear. Like I was going through so much. And she said to me, she was like, "I don't know why, all due respect, I'm here to support you, but I could have done this after my mom died." Like it took me forever to get to the point where I could write about my mom's death because it was too tender, it's too close, right? And so I had shelved it and not shelved it. I'd write pieces that I sort of knew subconsciously were going to go into this memoir, but they were standalone pieces as well. And some of them I'd publish and some of them I'd post. And last year in earnest, I really decided I really wanted to do this. And I started again with that initial memoir. And I just got this whole sense, this whole knowing that that wasn't the way I needed to go, that I needed to stop that. And then I need to remember that everything that I had already gone through, I had already written. Like I'd written them in social media posts, I'd written them on my blog, I had posted them, I'd published essays about them. And if I could just put all of that together in chronological order and sequential order, I got the sense that it could be its own book. And that's exactly what happened. I put it all together sequentially. And I just sort of laid it out from the beginning of the moment where I realized he was gone
Mhm.
to not everything by far. I mean, that could have been a much longer book, but I thought it did a great job of sort of explaining what it was like to go through those moments and those thoughts. When you're in trauma, you have these intrusive thoughts sometimes that come
Mhm.
and you just can't really help them. They just come. And for me, the easiest, I apologize for Jake. He is mad at the world right now because
Girl,
we've
that's all
locked him
right.
up. Howling at the world, raging at the winds, like, "How dare you lock me up?" And so I had all of that there and I put it all together. And I didn't know if it was gonna work, right? And then I had people read it and it worked. Like, and by work, I mean the objective. The objective was for me always to put all of this into words to do that justice. Because as a writer, that's how I do it justice. I couldn't do his eulogy. That was a mess. I didn't even know how I was going to walk into that building, much less say an entire eulogy. And it was what was right for my mental health at the time. But I really, on some level, regret that I couldn't do him justice as far
Mhm.
as who he was to me and what he meant to me. This book still doesn't even do it justice. Um, you were at the launch party, and I put together a playlist, and so there's a playlist of all these songs that
Yes,
meant something
which
to
I
me,
absolutely loved.
all those 60s and 70s songs,
It
stylistic
was
and
great.
spinners,
I'm like, "I want the mixtape. Bring it, girl. I
right,
want
right, right.
it."
Well, I posted the playlist. So if you have Spotify or Amazon Music, that's a public playlist that you can check out and listen to. Cause it's like, I know a lot of people are like, "Well, what was that song? What was that song?" So they're all there and you could just like listen to them whenever you want. Um But yeah, so that's what this process was about. This process was about doing him justice, honoring that connection. But also just really, really the work, when I say it worked, was really to have people who are going through what I was going through read something like this and go, okay,
Mm.
like this is taking a really long time and it's really intense and it's still not quote unquote over. Like I see everybody else is supposed to be over by now and I'm feeling some kind of way about it. And it was, 6 years into it, I'm saying, yeah, I just cried my eyes out yesterday. Like bawled my eyes out yesterday. So if you're a year in or 2 years in or however, it's fresh and you're like, this is taking a really long time. Am I ever going to be okay? The answer is no. You're never going to be okay because what you're asking is, are you ever going to be the exact same person you were before that loss? Never, ever. But there's a new person that emerges, right? And through the process of the healing that I did, the process of a lot of work that I put into myself, you get to realize that. But when you're at the end of that, it doesn't feel like that. Like if somebody tells
Mhm.
you this is going to be forever, buck up. You're like, F you, I want to punch you in the face, right?
So
um,
so now that the book is in the world, birthed out here, people are reading it, taking what they will from it.
yeah.
What does that feel like? I mean, do you feel finished or
No,
is there
no. I
something
feel like,
else that needs to come
yeah,
after? And maybe it's
yeah,
too soon to
yeah.
be asking about the after, but
No, actually, interestingly enough, this was never, because this wasn't the initial memoir that I was writing in my head anyway. Um, this doesn't even come close to feeling like finished or even, this is like the beginning of this process, I think, for me. We have that Facebook group, the
mhm.
Grief Thoughts group on Facebook, and I've
Which
been,
you just started, right?
I
Like
just started.
it's a new group.
I just started about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks tops, and it's like up to like over 400 people. Um, because people need a place for that, right? Like you can't spill out your grief at work. Sometimes your loved ones don't want to hear it either because they're going through their own or they just like are done. Like, can we talk about something else? Right. They may not say it to your face, but you get the sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's so few places in which grief is an acceptable conversation, right? Like you go to tea and you're like, so can we speak about like grief? It's like and that's a container space in which that's what it's for, right? Like you can talk about other things. Like we talk about music as it relates to grief, or food you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be um, specific, but it can be a place in which you drop that, where you can't drop it anywhere else, where it's not sort of polite. It's not in polite society to say, "Hey, I'm really," how are you doing? The stock answer is, "I'm okay. I'm hanging in there." Not actually. Today's a really hard grief day. Actually, I woke up bowled over by a huge rogue wave of grief. And that'll happen to you. Like the seas will be calm, and this 100-foot rogue wave will come and tumble your boat out of the ocean. And you're sat there like, what just happened? Right? Like, and people need to know that too. Like when you get into this grief thing, it's so fictionalized in a way that is so linear and so neat and so tidy. And it's not linear and it's not neat. And it's showing tidy is ugly
Mhm.
and painful and raw. And it could consume you if you let it, right? The paradox of that is I've met a lot of people doing this work this last, I want to say, 6 months where I've started to really open up those conversations and hold those kinds of containers offline first, like just in real life. One of the things that keeps coming up is this need to not engage in that work, to not deal with the grief at all, right? And so because they're doing this, it's so maladaptive that years later it becomes almost pathological, where you're either drinking too much or doing drugs or over consuming whatever it is that you're using to numb yourself. You know, engaging in really maladaptive practices to sublimate and sort of bury that grief because you can't even look at it. Because at this point, you couldn't look at it then, and now it's snowballed and it looms so large in this sort of fear part of your psyche that you can't touch it. There's guilt maybe in there wrapped around what you did or didn't do that's often fictionalized because you're self-flagellating about how super heroic you were supposed to have been when in reality you were a human going through a huge loss and you probably dropped several balls because that's what we do because we're, you know, this person that we love right now is gone. And that's a trauma to us, even when they die slowly. I know people who at the outset were really calm and okay with that. And all of a sudden, a couple of months later, it hits them like they go to pick up the phone to call their mom or their dad or their sibling or whatever. And they lose it.
Yes.
They lose it,
Yes.
right? They were like, what happened? I was fine. We'd come to this, no, because they're not there, right? Grief isn't linear. It's not neat. It's not tidy. It never will be, and it never was. And the fact that society has sort of forced us to do that has led to some really painful, unnecessary, maladaptive and self-sabotaging ways to handle that, right? And all that trauma, if we could just paradoxically sit in that pain at the outset. And sometimes it's too much.
Did you know something about grief before this big loss?
Sadly, my life has been marred.
Grandparents or
sadly, my life has been marred by grief from kind of early. The first funeral I went to was my great grandfather, who my grandmother who raised me took care of up until the very end. He was in his 90s. I was 17. That wasn't really impactful. When I was 24, my first love, who I'd been with since I was 16, he died by suicide. And that was my first real, this grief could kill me. Like this grief could consume me if I let it, experience of what just happened, trauma, grief, pain, gumbo. And I've lost a couple of people in my life since then. Sadly, I am a Black and Latina in New York City. We die earlier and younger and of myriad things that the average American outside of urban cities don't tend to die of early and often. And so I've lost a lot of people, gun violence, drug overdoses. So it's interesting, like a couple of days ago, I was just talking to a friend and I said, my whole life I've been frustrated by this realization that grief and loss has been such a predominant theme in my life. And now I finally get it. If I can take any of that stuff and through the process of being a 20 plus year practicing Buddhist, the process of using my culture and my traditions that I grew up in, and the ton of psychotherapeutic work that I've done over the years, all of the ways in which I inform myself and educate myself and pull myself out of these really painful places. If I can use that and help other people, then there it is. There it was.
I was going to ask you, what do you want to see happen with this? Now you've got 400 folks who are tuning in who want to find a space to put their grief. What do you want to see happen? What would you say? I don't know if you can say successful or not successful. How do you think about this? Maybe not an end game so much, but what's the higher plane or the higher ground?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I'm watching it sort of grow into that on its own. Like none of this was plotted out. I just sort of stumbled into all of this. And as I watch it grow, first in the offline space and now more and more so in the online space, I think one of the things that's clear to me is I want to be able to facilitate the kinds of conversations around grief that aren't being had often enough. There are some people out there that are doing amazing work around really engaging in grief, right? In really healthy ways. But it's not the kind of conversation because it's scary, right? People don't want to think about their own mortality. People don't want to think about the mortality of others. But once you've been initiated into that space, right? Because grief isn't something you go into willingly. It's like the most reluctant, the least welcomed of all emotions, right? Even rage has its place, but grief is like the one thing that you're like, nobody asked you to be up in here. Who opened the door for this joker, right? Like nobody wants that. Have to deal with it on its terms, right? It's the one thing that you can't turn away from. You can, but it's not ever going to go away, right? You're never going to be able to engage in that in a way that's healthy and helps you heal, you know? And I like to be able to facilitate those kinds of conversations, because when I see those kinds of conversations being had, I see in the moment so much healing happen, so much shifting for the person. And that to me makes a lot of sense as to why I seem to be engaging in this work. That to me seems, when I say, it's working, that's what's working. I see that conversation shifting things in people, the ability to just have the conversation, being able to sort of allow a sort of acceptance and healing. And, again, we are social animals. I'm a very lone wolf kind of person. I'm an only biological child. I was lucky when I got older. We got some kids in the family. And so I have adopted sisters and brothers. But growing up into my teens, I was an only kid. So I'm very used to being alone. And I like my solitude. But at the end of the day, we're social beings. And this pandemic has shown us that more than ever, I think. And to have a space, even if it's just online, for some people, that you can share that grief, that you can be honest and vulnerable, where people don't look at you like, isn't that a bit much after all this time? Or isn't that a bit outsized of a reaction to like a cat dying? You know what I mean? Like people do this. You'd be surprised.
Oh, I know. Yes,
I
you're
guess you wouldn't
absolutely
be
right.
surprised.
And the fact that you raise it, and I know there are people who are listening right now, the fact that you raise it makes it okay for people to acknowledge that is what has been happening to them. That people will say, oh, well, you lost your husband. It's been a year, snap out of it. Your grandmother died 5 years ago. Your father died, 9 months ago. Like, why are you still on the floor? Like, why are you still, and there's no roadmap for people's grief journey, except now there might be with your book.
Well, I think that if anything, I showed that when we're looking for the roadmap, there isn't a roadmap. You have to allow grief to create its roadmap. The roadmap gets created in the engaging with the grief, right? It makes its own map, and you're just sort of, it's terrifying because you're wandering in this forest of pain and loss and grief, and it's dark and you don't know where you're going. You've never engaged, even if you've lost someone before, this particular loss may create something completely different in terms of how grief manifests. And so a lot of the times you're alone, you're sort of by yourself, and you don't know what the roadmap is looking for. And when people read books around grief, I think to a certain extent they are looking for a roadmap. And I think my book may not work in that extent, or it may work in that it just shows you there is no, like, you would think 6 years on, I would have had the roadmap. But what I ended up with was, your grief took its own meandering time. You wanted it to hurry, like by year one, you wanted to be like, done. We're putting it in the box. We're closing it up. We're sealing it. We're putting it away. We're done. And it didn't. And you allowed the process to take the process that it took. And it's still taking, right? Like at the end of the book, it was clear that it wasn't going anywhere. It hadn't ended. It would never end. It's just 6 years later, the trajectory of what I had learned and how I had grown from, a zombie, barely living except for just sort of being present to mother my child. Being his parent was like the beacon.
Did that save you, help you,
Yes.
give you a different perspective? Because when you're the mother and you're the responsible parent, right? The where the child spends the majority of their time. You can't linger in the bed too long. You can't be on the floor all day, right? Because your kid got to eat and they got to get the schoolwork.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, was that?
It was a delicate dance between the most enormous gratitude I've ever had for anything in my entire life, that I had this person that I could focus on to stay for, and this almost excruciating resentment some days when I didn't want to be here and deal with anything anymore. And the pain was too much. And I just wanted to run away and not do a damn thing. And I would look at him and go, "Ah, if it wasn't for this kid, I could just run away," however that might look. And that's the God's honest truth. The God's honest truth is, as parents, sometimes the thing that saves us is the thing that we're resentful for, because we're looking at them like, if it wasn't for you, well, I could just leap off of this cliff into the abyss.
Yeah.
And in the moments when you're frustrated and in pain, those are honest feelings,
but the other part
right?
of that too, Issa, is we've seen people with children, Kate Spade,
Absolutely,
a couple other people who their children wasn't enough to anchor them to the here and now.
Absolutely.
And because that grief and that pain or whatever that was way greater than what could anchor them and root them.
Sometimes I'm very clear about the fact that he is what rooted me and what saved me and what kept me here and anchored. I'm a little loath to say that sometimes, because we see this young woman, Chesley.
Yes.
And her passing it really affected me, because she was 30. I didn't get pregnant with Theo until 33. I had him at 34. So me at 30, I was, just as young and bright and beautiful, but just as lost and just as in pain, and putting up a good face, a good front. And so I think about that. I think about what, I'm loath to put it all on Theo, because we all have to fight. It's not like, as a parent, he kept me here, because like you said, sometimes even that's not enough for a parent. I think I just needed something to anchor me.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, having Theo was it,
Mm-hmm.
In the past, ironically enough, before Theo, it was my dad. I was like, I have to stay for my dad. I have to be here present for my dad, because if I weren't here, it would kill him. And so I've been fortunate that I've had these people in my lives that I can do that for, until I got healthy enough that I could do it for myself, which is a big shift for me, because now, obviously, as a parent, I'm always going to want to be here and be present and do what I need to do for my kid. But with all of this sort of triage, emergency sort of trauma recovery and deep work that I was doing around what was happening in my life, I've sort of just been able to get sturdier and steadier and be here for my own self, for my own damn self, Like,
so what does your life look like now? Like, how do you feel now? And do you think about the future and what that could look like for yourself?
Now, right now, life is a little frenetic because of the book, which is a good frenetic. I'm not in any way, shape, or form complaining. There's just a lot on my plate with the book. Prior to that, wrapping up the book, it's my kid homeschools. He does best in a homeschool environment because of his learning needs. And so a good chunk of my time is, homeschooling him and managing all of his different services that he gets and stuff, and writing and, just being in the moment, trying to sort of really honor the old man's legacy. What he wanted most for me was to be able to live a life. He got old enough to realize his mistakes, right? I mean, towards the end, he was very, very supportive of all of my artistic endeavors, which I appreciated. Um, so just lots of writing, lots of not running away to an island somewhere, which is what I really most want to do on any given day, especially when it's freezing and it's snowing.
I leave Saturday.
Oh, where are you going? Where?
Dominica. Girl, I need a break. I'll take you in my heart.
Yes, yes, ma'am. If you don't post pictures, please send me some so I can be there with you in spirit. Okay, because oh my God, I love that. Yeah, that's on the agenda for this year too. Thank you for saying that. That's also, I haven't been on a vacation since pre-pandemic.
Yes, girl, I
haven't been on a vacation since pre-pandemic. So this year, I just got my booster this weekend. So Mama's ready to go. So yeah, and as far as future stuff is concerned, I've been doing a lot of, and I'm always starting something up. I'm always speaking my mind and starting conversations. And when I see injustice or oppression or marginalization or any kind of this can't. I can't stay shut, Babz. You
girl,
already
I know who you are, girl. I listen. I read you every day, so I go get my Issa every day. I was like, okay, let me see where she's at. Where she's at. So I get my Issa every day because, because it just keeps me rooted and connected. And you talk about things that I care about, like I deeply care about, and grief is one of those things because I got a good friend who just lost her husband, and it is painful, and I think there's grief there mixed with some guilt, mixed with some longing, mixed with aloneness, mixed with, I thought I could have more time kind of stuff.
Always.
And so it's painful.
That's the one thing I said over and over again after my dad died. My best friend, I had forgotten that so much of that was a blur. And she said, yeah, I said something a couple of months after he died. And I said, I just wish I'd had more time. She said, yeah, you kept saying that over and over and over again for days after you died. I was like, did I? She's like, yeah, over and over and over again. That's what I said. I just thought I had more time. I just thought I had more time.
I've said that a lot lately because I've lost some old lovers, and I've lost some people who are dear to me. And I remember thinking, God, I thought I would circle back around because I thought I'd have more time. And and you don't, right? And it's a hard lesson because none of us have more time.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think that one of the things that this has taught me is that one of the things that I am, even though it's super painful and I don't enjoy it at all, one of the things that I'm really good at is working through really major transitions in life, whether it be, the grief of losing a parent or, all of the myriad ways in which transitions can throw us for a loop. I feel like a transition specialist or something.
I do
you know
too,
what I mean?
Issa. I do. Yeah. I feel you because I feel that way too. I don't know what that is. I would say a transition specialist.
Right. We're gonna create our own thing. All right, that's what we're gonna be.
But I do. There's something inherent in me that allows myself to press forward. I guess because I know how I want to live, and I just see it over there, and I just keep my eyes on where that is so that I can move through. I don't know, but
I'm going to say this, and it's not to exclude anyone else who isn't, but I'm going to say that it's probably a small dose of, we're both Tauruses. I'm going to say that. And I'm just going to admit that right off the bat, not to exclude anybody who isn't. I'm just going to say that being a Taurus, we use our stubbornness for good. right?
Yes.
We use our stubbornness for good. We can be stubborn, and people say that that's a bad thing, but it's only a bad thing when it's self-sabotaging. But what I can say is that there are times in which it keeps us focused, it keeps us going, even in the midst of the worst times of our lives. We are grounded, we're earth, right? We steady ourselves no matter how
Yes.
afraid we are. There's no such thing as fearless, right? Like my girl Stacy recently, she's been talking a lot about how fearless isn't a thing, right? Like
Right.
everybody feels fear. You just got to
I
do it anyway. There's
know.
a difference between fearlessness and courage, right? Fearlessness is a mythical thing that just doesn't exist. Courage can be accessed. That's a thing that you can develop like a muscle, right? And sadly, you and I have had the kinds of lives in which we've had to develop that muscle. Just
Courage on the fly. Courage on the way up, courage on the way down.
Yes, exactly. But I think that that makes for the kind of, again, that feeling of being a really good transition specialist, in which, you know, how did you get through this really horrible thing or really challenging thing or really painful thing? How did you get through this period of loss? How did you get through whatever it may be? We're really good at being able to help people do that because we're so accessible. Like we just, we're Tauruses. I keep coming back to that. Like the Taurus energy is such an interesting dichotomy of being really elegant, but also being really down to earth and muddy and approachable, right? Like you wouldn't think those two things could coexist. But
you're right. You're right. You're right.
We allow our wounds to first of all, we don't live in shame. Before you shame us, we're gonna put it all out. This is what happened.
Girl,
this is what's going on.
And you've seen people try to come for me with shame all the time. And I'm like, yeah, you either don't know me or you
right. Are you new here or were you not paying attention?
Baby.
Like, yeah. So we don't, so that helps a lot too, because we've done that already, right? We did that shame work. We had to do that shame work early and really work through that. So now we can live as authentically as possible, because that's what keeps people inauthentic is the shame, right? But once you do battle with that and you're like, in the way, like I already showed you, what are you gonna do?
That's it.
Out me?
Girl, I've already outed myself. You better stop.
Right.
Issa, I have enjoyed this conversation. I want you to come back and talk more.
I would love that so much. Thank you for having me.
I think you have a voice that resonates with people. I think this book is resonating with people. I love that you had people reading from the book. I'm salty that you didn't have me read from the book, but that's all right.
Okay. Listen. That's all I need to know. If you're down, there will be others. Trust and believe there will be.
I'm down because
other things happen, and the book is just launching, so it's gonna be a minute. You're gonna be sick of it by the time this is done.
Never. I'm waiting for 2.0. I'll wait for the second one too. Thank you, Issa Moss. Thank you so much for this book, Brief Thoughts.
Thank you.
I wish you every success on this book tour. And I will see you soon. And hopefully soon I'll be in New York hanging out.
Yes.
And you can come to Connecticut, girl.
Yes.
Come Metro North and come to Connecticut.
That's right.
Yes. Love you, Issa Moss.
Love you.
Say hi to Theo.
Thank you.
Everybody, I'll see y'all tomorrow. Y'all take good care. Thank you, Harry Droz. And we'll be back tomorrow. This spell is for Freddie Gray. This spell is for Eric Garner. This spell is for Eric Garner. This spell is for Armin Aubrey. This spell is for Armin Aubrey. This spell is for Fernando Castillo. This spell is for Fernando Castillo. This spell is for Michael Brown. This spell is